Hi there, business owner. Are you looking to improve your business knowledge? Do you want to see behind the scenes of successful businesses? And more importantly, are you looking to build a better business in just 15 minutes each week? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to the 3Bs podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 3Bs podcast, your go-to 15-minute bite-sized episode to help you build a better business. As always, I'm your host Stephanie, and today we're diving into something that's often talked about online, and that is that progress over perfection mentality. And it can really transform the way you run your business and even your life. And I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it's something really important to me and something that's been highlighted really recently over on LinkedIn. So if you're over there, you've probably seen my posts. But progress over perfection is something that business owners really need to learn. Specifically, if perfectionism is something that you often strive for in your life. So for me, I'm a huge perfectionist. Perfectionism has held me back so much in business and in life because sometimes you don't take that jump and you just need to do the thing in order to get better, to build your business, to take that next opportunity, whatever it may be. In fact, in many interviews when I was in employed roles growing up, they would ask you what your weakest point was, or what was your trait that was the biggest red flag, for a better word. And I would always say perfectionism, because I am a perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect, but sometimes that means things take me longer, which is then less effective. And obviously for a business, that's less output for them per person they've got working if they're perfectionists. Also, if you looked inside my Canva, if you looked inside my notes app in my phone, if you looked inside my email marketing software, you would see hundreds, if not thousands, of content ideas, of business ideas, of service ideas that I've either had for myself or for clients that have never actually come to fruition because they've been delayed launching the thing because it's not perfect yet, or couldn't find the perfect name for something, or maybe it's not perfect, or maybe I'm not the best person to do this. Maybe I'll ask somebody else to help me with this project, and never got round to it. So all that gold is sitting in my notes, in my Canva. I mean, I've created full presentations and then never given them. So I am the lesson in sometimes progress over perfection is something I'm still working towards too, but it's definitely something I'm getting better at. So this week's episode of the podcast, I wanted to talk about progress over perfection in the hopes that it gives any other perfectionists out there a little nudge in the right direction to just do the thing. So today we'll talk about why perfectionism is a trap, the benefits of prioritizing progress over perfection, and practical strategies that I use and that you could use to help you embrace that more progress-focused mindset instead of going for that perfectionism, specifically if that's your default mode. So let's get into it. The perfectionism trap. So let's break down why perfectionism can be more harmful than helpful. I alluded to it before, but perfectionism is often a masquerade for a strength. So being a perfectionist is a good thing. And do you know what it can be? You want things to be excellent, and you're usually really detail orientated, and the level of things you actually produce are fantastic. But the reality is perfectionism does stop you in your tracks. And although the things you do put out are excellent, think of all those things you're leaving on the table because you're not willing to make that jump because they're not perfect. Procrastination is one of the big things. So because you're waiting for the perfect time to start something, diets are a great example of that. It's like, oh, I will start on Monday, or oh, I'll start in January. I'll just get Christmas out the way and then I'll start the thing, because then it'll be the right time to do it. Actually, that means you never do, or you do start something because you've waited so long, you've missed the boat, particularly in business. If there's a trend, so when the autumn budget comes out, for example, I do my roundup on the podcast, I send an email to all my clients, and I make content around what is being announced and the changes that the autumn statement or the spring budget bring around. If I sat and waited until they were perfect and I sat on my content, I was like, it's not the right time to do this. If I released it now, a month later, it would no longer be relevant. It would be things that my clients and business owners had already heard before. It wouldn't have the impact that it did because I was waiting for the perfect time. Also, missed opportunities. It's the same sort of thing. If you wait for every detail to be everything to be perfect, You're going to miss those deadlines, those trends, or even customer needs. If I waited to start talking about tax returns until February, it's 11 months until they're due again, and I've missed the window for the January tax return. And then also burnout. So the constant pressure to meet these honestly unobtainable standards can leave you exhausted and unmotivated and think, why don't I just go and get a job at Tesco? And as a business owner, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that has had that thought process more than once of, maybe I should just give this up and just go and get a job. And that's usually a sign that you are holding yourself to such a high standard and you want to be perfect and it's unattainable. So naturally, the dopamine or the joy or the satisfaction in your job you would usually get, you're not getting. In fact, you're going completely the opposite way and going downwards because you're putting this constant pressure on yourself. Imagine you're launching a website for your business. You keep tweaking the design, rewriting the copy, changing the layout. The pictures don't look right. I've been there, done it. Months and months pass, and you've lost out on all those potential customers because your website's not even live yet. Sometimes done is better than perfect. I've heard James Ashford say it before. Sometimes done is better than perfect. And you know what? If you want to start tweaking it once it's online, do it. Get it out there, then tweak it. Last week, I came on the podcast. It's something I'm going to be really honest about. I struggle with is myself on video. Since going to video and not audio only on the podcast, I know it is better for my clients and I do it, but I can no longer sit in my pajamas and do it. And I feel like I have to put my makeup on. I have to make an effort with the way I look. At one point, I wanted to make sure I had a different clothes on every single time I recorded the podcast, which is crazy in hindsight, but the perfectionist in me wanted it to be perfect. Last week, the time I would usually record the podcast, I'd got delayed with meetings, my children had been sick, and things had just naturally, time had just drifted away from me. So I made the decision to just go on and record it like this with no makeup on, knowing I looked really pale, knowing that I was not happy with the way I looked. And you know what? I didn't have a single comment. Not one person has messaged me or got in contact with me and gone, oh, are you okay? You didn't look very well. Or there's been no comments on my appearance. There's been no nothing. So something that I am incredibly conscious of, and the perfectionist in me wants to look perfect. Do you know what? Your ideal clients don't even care. All they care about is the information that I'm giving. All you all care about is that I'm helping you build a better business in 15 minutes each week. And I think that's a lesson that we all really should learn and take on board. Again, progress beats perfection because we should really focus on the progress instead. Progress is where the real magic happens. If you've listened to the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett or the High Performance Podcast with Jake Humphries, they all say 1%. Those small little steps end up giving you the momentum that you need. You build your confidence, you keep the ball rolling. It's like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And for example, with the podcast, I'm now not afraid to come and record for you all if I'm not looking my best, if I'm not sounding my best, because actually the value is in what I'm saying, not what I look like or what I sound like. And many, many people, not just business owners, hate the sound of their own voice. And I used to be the same. But every week I have to go in and do the subtitles and make sure everything in the captions is correct because AI does not always pick up my accent and I have to change the words sometimes and the spellings of things that have been generated incorrectly. By doing that over and over and over again, I no longer worry about what I sound like. It's not something that's even a problem to me anymore. And that is just the momentum of having to do it every single week. This is the biggest thing, learning. Something I taught my children really early on is we don't have a bad day, we have something to learn from. So I'll say to them, oh, have you had a good day? And they'll go, no. And I go, oh, what did you learn today? That is the biggest thing that has made a massive impact on my kids and myself and all my clients when I talk to them is it's not a bad thing. It's something to learn from. So every action you take will teach you something new. Whether it's good or bad, those mistakes need to be reframed in your mind as lessons that can help you improve. So if I say something on the podcast, maybe I stumble on my words or maybe I take a too long of a pause because I can't get my words together, I used to delete them out. But no, I'm real. I'm a real human and everyone makes mistakes. I am included in that and I will hold my hands up wholeheartedly. But those mistakes become lessons that you learn to get better next time. And also, if you are just doing the thing, even if it's not perfect, you will have a result. Regardless of what that result is, progress, no matter how small, will lead to an outcome that you can analyze, learn from, and build on. There's a tangible physical outcome no matter what progress you take. If you sit on perfectionism and you delay things, you very rarely get that result. Even if that result is not ideal, you can learn from it and then build on it next time. And then finally, how can we embrace progress? So now that we know why progress matters, and yes, it can be uncomfortable, let's talk about how you can adopt this mindset in your business and how you can start embracing that progress over perfection. Number one, set realistic goals. Have that big, scary goal. I feel like I say this all the time on the podcast. That big, scary goal, have it. That's what we're aiming for. But you need smaller, manageable steps. Those little, small steps, and only focusing on the next step is really important, because then you are making progress and you're not procrastinating on that small little step. So maybe for me, it's to make slightly less deletion out of my podcast recording. That hesitancy I just did is going to stay in the podcast. That's my small little step of embracing progress over perfection. Secondly, celebrate small wins. We talked about this on my podcast with Joe O'Neill. We've talked about this on a podcast many, many times before. Acknowledge every step forward, no matter how small, not even if that progress gives you an outcome you don't like, even if it means you make a mistake. Progress deserves recognition, and that constant little accomplishments soon start to add up in your brain, so that actually it's much easier for you to do the thing rather than sit on it and procrastinate because you're trying to be perfect. A good tip for this is at the end of each day or week, write down one thing you accomplished. I really love the reverse to-do lists. So instead of having a to-do list a mile long with all the things you have to do that day, start with a blank piece of paper or a blank thing on your notes app or a blank page on a Word document, however you best learn and write these things down. And at the end of every task you complete, you fill it in. Or at the end of every day, write down all the things that you did. It's much easier if you do it task by task. Although I get that can be quite time consuming sometimes, but task by task, or at the end of each day, write down the things that you have accomplished, so that you, at the end of the day, instead of going, oh, my to-do list was this big and now it's this big, it's like, okay, but my to-do-done list is now this big. Like, actually, I did all these other little things that made a difference. And finally, embrace imperfection. Remind yourself that perfect doesn't exist. It's subjective and it's opinion-based and often completely unnecessary. What matters is delivering value. Give yourself permission to release version 1.0. Give yourself permission to do it and do it badly, because you can always improve later on. Later on this year, around Christmas time, I will go back and look through some of our episodes from the beginning and pick out some of my favourite little snippets of information. So these bite-sized episodes are going to be even more impactful as a nice little roundup for the year. I will go back and find a part of version 1, episode 1, back in the day when there was no video. It was just me with a really poor microphone in my office. And you'll see the progress that I have made. And actually, if you don't put out point 1, you can't see how far you've come. Do you know what? I'll be honest. Perfectionism is something that I struggle with and continue to struggle with. Wanting everything to be flawless is something that you really have to really battle with if you want that to do. If I'd have waited for perfection, you would not be listening to this podcast now. The graphics, the content around it, none of it existed nearly 2 years ago. But actually, I now have 19 countries, business owners from 19 countries listening to this, and it blows my mind every week. Was every episode perfect? Nope. Was this episode perfect? Probably not, but we're here and we're going to keep going every week, building a community to help you build a better business in 15 minutes a week. So if I can embrace progress over perfection, so can you. I'll see you next week for the next episode. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the 3Bs podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please connect with us on social media. Like, rate and review wherever you are listening to this podcast so that I can help more business owners build a better business. See you next week.